I actually sometimes when I'll be eating something that I feel like isn't good for me, I'll quiver. I'll like
like a dog taking a shit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I did it at the library actually. Like a few days ago, I was thinking about something and I just like jolted. Oh, man. And I feel like I looked crazy in front of everyone.
Yeah, it's possible. Maybe you need to do that to, to really like, I don't know, tell people to back off in the library.
Yeah. Oh, this is good to bring up as the episode is starting. Mm-hmm. Trains in the background. We mentioned one time that sound in the background is trains, but it was like 50 minutes into an episode. People need to know that background sound is trains. It's not like some sort of weird appliance.
No, yeah. I think it's like our only like sound around here. I don't know. It's actually a weirdly quiet stretch of a pretty busy area in Chicago.
I do hear the window crack sometimes. I mean, there's a really big window here. But no, I feel like there is like a cracking sound sometimes in this room.
Ooh, that's spooky. Buildings shift. It's a very old building.
Yeah. In my house, actually, I do hear sounds from the masonry breaking down because I've been telling my landlord for years to do tuck pointing. And like there's a corner of my building that like it looks pretty bad. Like he really needs to do it.
But yeah, you have like a famously absentee landlord. So getting your like tenant telling you like, have you gotten $3,000 worth of tuck pointing done?
Wait, that's how little it is?
No, that'd be so much more than that. I need to see it there. But yeah, no. What am I saying? I don't know. I've actually kind of been surprised by Mason's prices. They're ready to do some pretty like back-breaking work for not a lot of money.
Yeah. No, my landlord's pretty good. Like since I moved in, I've had 3 different stoves. So a new fridge, like there are things that he's been good with. It's just that like for him, his stewardship is more so aesthetic. He's not thinking about the bones of the building. So like, for example, downstairs for me, when I moved in, there were people downstairs that were making a ton of noise, which wasn't that bad because I was up above, but the landlord and the landlord's mom live in the basement and they were just like, you could tell they were getting no sleep. Like I'd see them and they'd be like kind of like disheveled.
Strung out.
But yeah, after they moved out, they did like a huge renovation that they told me cost like $70,000 or $80,000.
Damn.
And what's wild is like my rent is very cheap and downstairs, I think they're paying the same amount. Mm-hmm. It's like, and they got like an $80,000 renovation.
Oh my God. No, yeah, your place has not been touched in a while. That's what I'd say, renovation wise. But that's a good thing. That keeps prices low. Shall we get into it?
Yeah. So welcome everyone to this week's episode of Silent Generation. We're going to be talking about a sporty topic, the Olympics. Mm-hmm. And it's very fortuitous because this happens to be an Olympic year. There's going to be an Olympic Games this summer in Paris. And we didn't really realize that. We just like Olympics.
Yeah, I just like the Olympics in general. And then when I realized like, oh, should we try and land this closer to like late July or something? No, I want to talk about it now before everyone else is talking about it, too. I might.
Yeah. No, we need to do our take on Hot Girl Summer.
Exactly. We got to get ahead of it.
No, actually, that's so over. We're not doing that.
Yeah, deeply over.
But yeah, I think when discussing the Olympics, it would be good to sort of talk about what we just generally like about them in the beginning from the perspective of people who aren't as into sports, because I think that's where we're going to be able to draw like the interesting cultural critique from. We're not going to do like a mid-history project. I'm not going to research the history of the Olympics.
There's like a little bit you need to know that like, I don't know. Just in order to be dangerous, you need to know a little bit about the Olympics. And so we'll toss that stuff in there, like regarding the modern Olympics. This is only about the modern Olympics. I don't really see any point to get too much into the ancient Greek version other than the fact that it existed and a whole bunch of French guys in the 1800s wanted to mimic it.
But it's interesting to talk about the revival because when people first started to speculate, like, what if we brought the games back? That was the time period that we like kind of enjoy a lot, the 1800s, which you seem to know more about than me.
I don't know. It's just, it's really interesting. Like anytime people try and look back and understand a previous time, and then like eventually that stuff becomes old enough that is the past to us. Like in the 1800s, they were just like yanking obelisks out of like Roman places and then putting them in, European or in New York. Stuff, but those obelisks were yanked from Egypt to get to Roman places in the first step. But now that obelisk has been in New York for like since the 1800s, so now it's historical in its own right. Like it acquires like all these layers of historiosity onto it. But
I'm a fan of the sort of 1800s interest in ancient cultures because they became such fans that they then sort of pushed their aesthetics of those ancient cultures past what they actually were.
Yeah.
You know, like the Medina Temple in Chicago, which is now like a casino. That building is not historically accurate, but I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I walked past that yesterday. It's like everything people say about like, oh my God, if you have a casino downtown, it's going to attract like, you know, just a bad energy around it. They're totally right. And the vibes are off around that casino. Yeah. It's just like people waiting for the casino shuttle, cigarette smoke, which usually I don't mind. But if the vibes are bad, then I do mind it. Yeah. The Medina Temple was built by the Shriners, which is like a weird, you know, like Freemasons, Elks, just like group for middle-aged white men to hang out and like drink beer and have little projects to work on. And so, yeah, it's this like pastiche of Islamic styles. It's just crazy that it has like minarets and stuff like that in the middle of downtown Chicago.
Yeah. And so the Olympics are not like a reinterpretation of ancient building traditions, although people in the 1800s did that plenty. Yeah. But you mentioned that like people a bit earlier in this time period who were interested in the ancient world, they tended to gravitate towards Roman things. And so their rediscovery of the Olympics was when they sort of got over that and started to look at Greek stuff more, right?
Yeah. So like by the time of the American Revolution, we saw America in a very like, you know, Roman sense. And that informed our architecture and things like that. But yeah, it's hard to put a date onto it. But yeah, starting in like the mid 1800s, I think we just got better at like, this is when like archaeology really emerged. The predecessor to that was antiquarianism, which was just like, I don't know, foppish dandies like going to Egypt and then just like picking through the dust for stuff. No real rigor to it. It's just more about like, this will look cool on my mantelpiece. But once we were actually able to like identify periods and identify origins and like certain like traits of different artifacts, we were actually able to like determine that a lot of Roman things were either like physically taken from Greece or they were like mimicking the style of that. And then also, I don't know, like Greeks were never, the Hellenistic Empire like could never be seen to be as like, I don't know, fascistic is not a great term, but like
as grand,
but also as cruel as Roman, as the Roman Empire could be.
Yeah.
So I think that we saw Greek things as higher minded and maybe like a little bit more naive. You know, they had democracy, but they like, I don't know, didn't have to actually like deal with an empire. You know, they didn't have an empire that they had to run democratically or anything.
There were Greek colonies though, actually in Italy. Yeah. No, they did expand, you know, a bit, but not as far as the Roman world did. But yeah, on the antiquarianism, I just want to mention a fun fact. So things like the Lycurgus cup, which is this really beautiful cup that changes colors depending on the light, it's speculated to have survived above ground from the fall of Rome into the Middle Ages and into the modern day in church reliquaries. Mm-hmm. So like there are like things that seem to have never been lost. Like another example is actually, well, this wasn't in the reliquary really, but there's this throne of St. Peter at the Vatican. It's a wooden chair from ancient Rome that survived above ground for like 2,000 years. But there's examples like that. Yeah, no. I myself personally, I tend to know a bit more about the classics than most people because I took Latin in high school for 2 years. Oh, wow. And a lot of it I take for granted, but like I can recall certain things that like are not common knowledge. I wonder how many people don't know that the Olympics are from ancient Greece, but I feel like most people do because when the games start, Greece comes first. You know, when
Greece
they start entering the stadium.
Yeah, and then I think the opening ceremonies like get so much more attention than the torch lighting ceremonies. I think that gets forgotten about, but yeah, they still always, I believe they've always started the torch from, what is it, the Shrine of St. Helen or something, but they start it in Greece all the time, and then they take it place by place.
That only really started, though, up again with the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens. I was reading that.
Oh, yeah. They lost it for a bit? Because I know in the... not to turn this into just like different fun facts about past Olympics, but in the 1968 Olympics, it was the first one to be held in like Latin America. And so they retraced Columbus's path was the idea, but they added a Greek part onto it. They're like, all right, we go to here, then we go to Italy, and then we go off.
Yeah. Interesting. Mm-hmm. But yeah, would you want to start to get into some of the things that you personally like about the Olympics?
Yeah, I love how much like visual content and identity that like not just the specific Olympic event has to do, but that every single like nation has to do. They have to like, I don't know, they're not going to change their flag or anything, but everything else they have to like, visually signify. Uniforms can always be assessed. Ralph Lauren did the uniforms to the Winter Olympics. I thought there were like different, I guess, outfits for different days and stuff, but there were some pieces that were like knitwear, like kind of chunky knit, and they had almost like cross-stitch patterned Olympic rings on it. I thought that was cool, but most of the time they're just like weirdly futuristic and kind of suck. So I would describe it. They look like they're at Sky High, the forgotten Disney Channel original movie.
I kind of wanted to rewatch that. But I think that the Ralph Lauren outfits, if I'm not mistaken, were made in China, which was controversial under the Trump administration.
That was the big thing about that, yeah. And then he did like navy blazers with like white pants and boat shoes. And I don't know. I think he loses the sauce sometimes.
Yeah.
He doesn't know. Like he's been, I don't know, making American tastes for so long. I think he forgets what he was originally inspired by. And he just kind of starts huffing his own stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I myself really like the opening ceremonies too. I watched 2 of them last night. Although I actually saw them when they happened. The Beijing 2008 Summer Olympics, as well as the Rio de Janeiro 2016 Summer Olympics. And it was interesting rewatching them because I remember the one in China being like very exciting when I was a child when I watched it. Mm-hmm. But now watching it, there were too many LEDs. It looked tacky. Like I bet at the time it was still kind of novel and futuristic, but it just looked like cheap and dollar store-esque a lot of the time.
2008 to me is just like Obama Olympics. That is just all I remember from that period.
Not recession?
Well, yeah, recession too, other stuff happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, to me it was Obama Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, I still sort of think those were like the coolest Olympics I've experienced. But the Rio one was more exciting to me to watch. I guess I did watch it in full. I kind of remembered everything. But I am like a Brazil aficionado. I love Brazil. Yeah. I speak Portuguese. I've been there. And it made me want to go back again because I actually went to Rio de Janeiro in 2018, like 2 years after the games had ended. But there was still like this like Olympic energy in the city. Like
2
for
years
example,
after? It's still like, wow.
But no, not necessarily in a good way, but you just had reminders. Mm-hmm. Brazil at that time actually, they entered a recession 2 years before they hosted the games. And by the time they hosted the games, they felt a little embarrassed, showing themselves off to the world. Yeah. And by the time I went in 2018, it was still like, things were not the best in Rio. Like there was a yellow fever outbreak, after they had just had the Zika epidemic. And then the day after I landed in Rio, a politician, Mahiel Franco, who was on the Rio City Council, got assassinated. And then the city was under martial law. But okay, Rio was like pretty chaotic, but then they're just reminders that the games had happened. Like when I went on the subway, their subway was brand new. Like they had built it for the games. It was beautiful. And like the announcements were in both Portuguese and English, which to me, I guess, I bet a lot of metro systems do that. But for me, it felt like,
even in Germany where everyone speaks English, like they just keep everything in German.
Yeah, I guess the announcements were partly for like, the Olympics, but it just felt me feel like that was kind of going on still. And I happened to be staying in the neighborhood that the main Olympic stadium for Rio is, Maracana. Mm-hmm. And so I saw the stadium and there were still people like selling, Brazil stuff outside of it. And the
energy definitely like overhangs for a bit.
Yeah. But I miss Brazil a lot. Like, I don't know. It's like this major world superpower that like people just don't think about. And it's like just speaking Portuguese and like knowing about it, it just feels like, the Lusophone diaspora is just like, it feels like a secret society. It's like really exciting.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know how much I personally want to share about this, but I was briefly dating a Brazilian girl and it was, this whole like look into like the secret Brazilian world of Chicago. Yeah. I've learned all these things. Like they all go to the same woman to get their eyebrows done. Like, cause none of them think that Americans can do it well enough. But then that woman is like pregnant right now. So they're all freaking out and trying to figure out what to do. And they're like trying to very politely be like, all right, when are you due? Like, all right, when can you next do eyebrows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Lusophone? Is that,
so
that's Portuguese.
That's
speaking?
The analogous term to say like Francophone for German speaking, Hispanic for Spanish speaking. Lusophone is like for Portuguese speaking. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, the Olympics feel like, well, they, at least public attention wise, they have outlasted the World's Fair. The World's Fair came from a similar period. We talked about this in our like malls episode a little bit with like the Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
And like there was like first like the British Fair and all that. So the sense of like, you know, we have to show off what the modern world is capable of, but in this very like cosmopolitan way of every country will show up, represent themselves like almost cartoonishly, and then, you know, have some kind of friendly competition in some way. And World's Fairs are still happening. They're just like more and more obscure and kind of feel more like trades fairs nowadays. I just know they had one in like Kazakhstan recently, which is always trying to like improve its image, you know, just battling Borat and that kind of stuff.
If only we did unite like that, like as Americans, you know, because international visitors are welcome at the World's Fair, but it felt like a very like American celebration.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing that I, as someone who like barely understands sports, likes a lot is just that the athletes at the Olympics are actually they're representing the places that they're from, because you don't experience this with professional sports in the United States. Yeah. It's like very few people represent the team that they grew up cheering on once they're a professional athlete. And it just doesn't make sense. It's like, what are you cheering for? These athletes that aren't even from your hometown. It's like, but when you're cheering on like other Americans, that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. It is you're so right. It's so like rare to have a hometown hero anymore in pro sports. I feel like it would just be so much of a bigger deal. I'm trying to think of like a famous recent case of anyone, but I'm really like not knowledgeable on sports. But my heart does go out to an enthusiastic transplant, because I consider myself that, in Chicago. Yeah. I was reading about this baseball player. I got to find his name again, but he's from Cuba, and he fled, of course, as many baseball players do. But instead of fleeing to America, he fled to Mexico, which is another path. Yeah. And he was just like so enthusiastic for it. He eventually ended up in the MLB. But when he walks out, he'll like wear a sombrero and stuff. Like he speaks Spanish, like of course he speaks Spanish fluently, but he's like so into Mexico specifically. And then he tweeted at the president to get citizenship, so that he's like, if you give me citizenship, then I'll play in the World Baseball Finals. And then he was granted citizenship basically off of a tweet. And so I love those guys. In basketball, Victor Wembanyama is this like French phenomenon. He's 7'5", 7'6", it's debated, but he's just like dominant and he's so good. And he's on the San Antonio Spurs. And I follow him on Instagram, and it's just really funny. It's just like 7'6" guy, 7'6" French guy wearing a like 10-gallon cowboy hat and just like a sleepy San Antonio bar. Like he's really trying to get into it there. He got a photo at the Alamo, as you have to go see. But yeah, it's cute.
I really can't name that many athletes. Like further on in the episode, I'll mention some divers I know about. But like, I don't know if I can name a single basketball player besides Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I really tried. He's exhausted. He's blown out. Yeah. Other reasons people besides
other reasons you.
Other reasons I am interested.
Yeah. The next section will be things other people can like. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the athletes are actually, you know, like from their countries. You end up with some. I don't know if these are super interesting cases, but I think they should get mentioned. You end up with like Eileen Gu was born in the U.S. to American mother, Chinese father. She competed for the U.S., but then she switched. And it's very celebrated in China. They're like, welcome back home. And in America, we're like, oh my God, you turncoat, changing immediately. But like, as you read more about her background, she grew up extremely affluent. One of the things on her Wikipedia page was just that like, she had her debutante at the Paris like Grand Ball, and it's like, all right, you're out of the Bay Area, what are you doing debuting in Paris? Like countries are made up to like that like class of people anyway. Like why shouldn't she switch teams in order to win a few more gold medals? And when asked about it, she pivots to a much more like ethnicity based kind of thing rather than nationality. But I don't know, there's a lot going on there. There's like, you know, competing for different teams and all that. You might have better angles for a different country.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the term third culture kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. They might self-identify as that.
I could totally see that. Yeah. I have friends like that. I feel like I'm pretending to be them just because I was a military kid And so I lived internationally for 3 years, but I have nothing on like my friend who went to high school in Jakarta and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I'm like so rooted here. I find it interesting to learn about their lifestyles, but like, yeah, I was at an appointment recently where, I mentioned to someone, oh yeah, the longest I've ever been outside of Chicago is like a month. And they thought that was crazy. So,
yeah, no, you're very centered.
Yeah.
The Olympics also feel so much less corporate.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we were watching the opening ceremonies. There weren't ads there, but I'm pretty sure during the competitions there are some. But it still feels like less because the athletes in the U.S. for like basketball, baseball, whatever, you'll see like little corporate logos on their jerseys and stuff. Yeah. They're bought out.
Yeah, no, it sucks.
Feels like a joke.
Yeah, and the stadiums too. Like I always love older like ballparks. Always just have like someone's last name, and then nowadays it's Petco Park and stuff. Guaranteed rate field. That's just such a.
In Detroit, there's also the Little Caesars Arena.
Hell yeah, Little Caesars Arena. Pizza. Yeah, and the Olympics, they've softened on this now, but they started with a very hard line like amateurism like bent. One of the founders was like from the like public school system in England, which is actually what we would recognize as a private school.
Yeah.
And so those always had a focus on like that you're an amateur, that you have a profession somewhere else, and that sport should never be done for financial gain. It should be done like for purely the love of the sport and competition. And in America, it's interesting because we don't have a developed like minor league system at all. We have one. We have what's called like AAA baseball, which is like where they put you if you're not doing very well in the MLB, or if they want to like develop you and stuff. But in Europe for like soccer, they have like U18 for under 18, U20, U22, that kind of stuff. And so if America had that, we wouldn't have to transform our college sports into our essentially like U22 league, basically. I always found that really interesting. I mean, that wall's falling down anyway now, because now you can compensate college athletes for their likeness. So we're just admitting they are pro athletes. They're just young is the condition.
Yeah.
But you'd see cracks in this earlier when like college football players would like, one of them tweeted like, I didn't come to the school to fucking play school. Like, it's just like, oh. Yeah.
One early thing that I read about the Olympics was that they initially had medals for the arts, and they would award people for their artistic talent, which I've always sort of thought that like schools should treat students who are aiming for professional art careers the way they do for sport careers, where they're more lenient with admissions and look at talent. Because it's different, it's like artists can go very far in select circumstances the same way artists can, or the same way that athletes can. And it's interesting that the Olympics started out with that sort of mindset, where there's like there's not a relationship between sports and the arts, but like in some ways they should be treated the same way.
And that it's outside of the like
normal paradigm.
I don't want to say academic, but it's outside of like the conventional career kind of path, like creatives and athletes are people who, I don't know. I think the ultimate intersection is like ballet dancers and stuff like that, where it's just like you have like a one key period of earning potential, like all the attention is on you.
No, one thing with artists is like they're typically not, successful when they're young, and unless they're like Renaissance prodigies or young British artists. There's plenty of exceptions in today's world, but like typically, I mean, people will make it when they're like 50, 60. There's, I'm going to butcher this last name, but Farma Farmayan, the Iranian artist who made art with mirrors and glass. And like she got famous like really late in life. Like her retrospective at the Guggenheim in New York, she attended it, but like she was like 88 or something. So yeah. But let's get into just sort of like reasons other people are into the Olympics. And this is also, I guess, largely from like a perspective of people who aren't as interested in sports. Although, no, actually, I think a lot of these apply to people who are more into sports. But one of the reasons I think is just because there's top athletes. I mean, duh. But I was listening to an episode of Crystal Kyle and Friends where Kyle Kalinske mentioned that like he, as a person, he's always rooting for the underdog. He's a leftist. He wants like working class people to be uplifted. In other contexts in media, he wants to root for the underdog in the movie. But when he's watching a sports game, he wants to see the best player dominate and crush everyone. I don't know. It just sort of like gets a lot of joy out of watching someone be that superior.
Dominant. Yeah. We want to see like, that's so funny when like people will talk about like most dominant athlete. And there's different ways to measure it and stuff. And the metrics I believe the most that I've read is that like, who's the better Williams sister? Is it Venus or Serena?
I feel like I hear Serena more.
Yeah.
But one of them was canceled. I think that factors in a lot.
Yeah. Whichever one's the better one, apparently through data analysis, is the most dominant athlete in terms of like how head and shoulders ahead you are of the next person in line, basically. But yeah, I think that's really cool. I want to see people completely dominate. I think it's really stressful when people have a sport where they get one Olympics. And that's like gymnastics and stuff like that, where you age out of it by the next 4-year cycle. And so it's all about like literally when you were born. And if you can like reach your peak at the perfect time for an Olympics, those ones are maybe the most sad. But with like swimming, you can come back multiple years, you know, and they create like a really pretty kind of arc, I feel, storytelling wise with that, where there's like, oh, he's a young buck, you know, starting out. And then it's like, this is him in his prime. He's seasoned. And then there's like, wow, his final one. Like, let's see what he can, you know, really pull out and surprise us. There's like a natural arc to this.
But I feel like even with some of those athletes, they're getting like Dianne Feinstein syndrome, like, you know, like, where they just won't let go. Like,
get the young people in there.
No, like Phelps, I mean, he kept saying multiple times he was going to retire. And then he kept going. I think there's other examples like that too. But yeah, people in today's society just like will not let go when they've had their cake. But yeah, another one I think that people really love is hot athletes. So for me, I don't really have celebrity crushes. If I have crushes on people, they're usually just like pseudo famous. They're not truly famous. There's cars racing outside. But yeah, for me, it's like, okay, there are hot Olympic athletes, but like, what am I going to get out of that?
They're on the TV. They're miles away. They don't know me. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It is a classic thing. I get weirdly angry at those like YouTube thumbnails of people like lusting over Olympic athletes. I just think it's unbecoming. Not that we should be like, I don't know, like so holy.
That sounds like manosphere content. Do they target you?
I'm getting targeted. Yeah, I'm getting targeted by algorithm. But yeah, and people always make those like jokes about like the Olympic Village. Like that used to be more of a secret thing of like, oh, there's a complete sex fest at the Olympic Village. But now that's like just a commonplace thing that people talk about and know about. I wish we didn't know about that. I wish we could like elevate them that they are these like gods who walk among us, like, you know, gracing the top of it.
It just feels like there's no level of society where like moral codes are enforced. And like, I don't know, it'd be nice if like these people are so disciplined, we're not then talking about their sex lives to the media. One thing though, I mean, on Olympians being hot is when I was watching the Rio Olympic Games, when the American team entered the stadium, what's funny is they looked like Mii's to me, like Nintendo Mii's. Yeah. Because they're also tall and slim. Yeah. And they just like had like a lankiness like, to them.
Yeah, in formation too as well, like the Mii's in the Mii Plaza.
That was funny because like they're clearly muscular, and if I was looking at them face to face, I would feel intimidated. Yeah. But you know, up above they just look so small.
You wrote on here that there's specifically for American Olympic athletes, there's like a suburban energy.
Oh yeah,
emanating from them.
With gymnasts especially. I mean, you know, Michaela Maroney.
I kind of remember her.
She got famous because she got silver when she, by all accounts, was supposed to get gold, but she just messed up. And so then she was on the Olympic podium smirking, and like everyone.
The smirk,
yeah. But I remember like all of the cutscenes in between when the female Olympic athletes would compete, they'd all be like so catty. They just had this like, I mean, it's good for them that they have this, but oftentimes with people from the suburbs, they just emanate this confidence, but it's fragile and it's hard to explain. It's like, yes, you wake up every day smiling, but also it's really easy to make you not feel good. Oh, man. And they just have that sort of energy. But I think that it just comes from like a lot of elite athletes. They have to be on traveling teams, which is a very suburban concept. It's like you're gonna be bussed around.
Yeah, you like there's always those things where you're like, oh, I have to own a car, but like Yeah, like you might have to own a car for that. I mean, yeah, there is busing for stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when I briefly worked in union construction, one of the superintendents I worked with, his son was like rising the ranks of hockey. It was just whenever anyone who knew him came into the office, first question was, hey, how's the son doing in hockey? Like this was like the topic of conversation in this company. And it was just, he just talked about the traveling and all that. And these are union construction guys. Of course, they live in the suburbs. Not a single one like lives in the city. I say that, but I was talking to a union sprinkler fitter, and he was saying that he has his suburban guys who like, you know, live out there and service projects in the suburbs, or they'll drive down. But then he has a core contingent of divorced guys who live in the city. And this is extremely common for sprinkler fitters, is that they'll get divorced and then move downtown. And I don't know, they're closer to their job sites and the money is good. But I'm like, how many, do you have like 6 divorced fire sprinkler guys? Like it's not one of those career, like pilots, you know, they're always having like marital issues and stuff because of the demands of their job. But like sprinkler fitters.
Yeah. I always find pilots like weirdly attractive. I mean, more so than I let on in the uniforms episode. I really like uniforms. But one fun fact about them is they're like the profession most likely to vote Republican. It's like 75%.
Oh wow!
I wonder what about the
more so than like
of,
any trade or anything.
Yeah, it's like because if you're flying around, you should have a certain worldliness, which usually leads to being liberal.
They're just going into Holiday Inns, though. You know, they just fly into an airport and then stay at a Holiday
I guess
Inn.
so, but I don't know.
In terms of male pilots, I think they're one of the few good examples of good short sleeve dress shirts.
Yeah,
you know, they really pull it off. It's them and then NASA control center guys in the 60s. Those guys, short dress shirts, little black tie, horn rim glasses, serious business.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the suburban thing, it's athletes, whenever I watch any like quick like documentary thing on Olympic athletes, I feel like during the Olympics they'll have this. They'll have like the backstory, interview their family, and everyone's like, oh, we always knew they were going to have it. There's always something special about them. But they're just so hyper specialized now.
Yeah.
And this was not a thing in the past. I don't know. I have a rant about this because I think that like people should be a little more well balanced in, I mean, everything. I kind of hate the specialization of people. I like the idea of like everyone should be broadly, you know, like I guess I went to an engineering school and I was always kind of bummed out by the lack of interest people had in humanities and stuff. And I went to, my high school was a like tech-oriented academic school that had no sports, and I always felt like I was shortchanged in that too. And we also had no drama program either. I feel like that could have been a fun thing to balance. I've always wanted to like have a finger in a few different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was reading this thing so Tommy John was this great baseball player. He was a pitcher, and he tore his UCL, ulnar collateral ligament. And then in 1974, they did a surgery that was experimental at the time, and they reattached it. And so it was a crazy big deal. Like they called him like the bionic man and stuff. And he got back out there and he returned to his previous pitching ability. But his son wrote an article about how like we specialize kids too much. And that's where we're seeing this crazy rise in repetitive strain injuries among kids. Like kids are getting Tommy John surgery at ages 14 and 15 from Little League from throwing so much. And then I like get to the end of the article and I realize that Tommy John's son, who's so passionate about fixing this and all that, is a chiropractor. And I'm just like, oh, you're not, if anyone's going to find the solution to this, it's not going to be you, man. It's not going to be weird quack science.
Yeah. But yeah, the specialization of sports, this sort of a foreign concept to me is like an urban child. It's like, I was talking with my CrossFit trainer about that actually, when I was seeing a CrossFit trainer. I do CrossFit now, but I don't work with a personal trainer. But he was talking about like, oh, you know, now as a kid, like you just have to pick one sport and just do that. It was just breaking my brain. It's like, it's one of those like keeping up with the Johnsons things where it's like, my parents were not involved in my life like that. Like, and for them to want me to excel at a single sport that much, like it's just so foreign. But one thing I also learned from CrossFit actually is like one of the ideas behind it is that like you need to continuously learn new movements, practice them, practice different sports. It's like the variety within each CrossFit class is supposed to make you stronger. Like the amount of movements they do, it's just wild. Yeah. I'm actually a bit CrossFit skeptical in the sense that
I was going to describe myself as that, but
the classes are high risk. You can injure yourself badly. I don't actually do the classes. I go into my gym to practice on my own, but the ethos behind it works really well for me. Working with free weights, not using machines, using variety. Like I do recommend it in that way.
Yeah. Now, I've always, been CrossFit skeptical, but I don't know. The more I read about it, like I think it came from a very good place. People wanted functional fitness. People wanted like to not just be so stationary, and like it was some powerlifting people that it came from. And you can get pretty bored doing like powerlifting and stuff like that. And so I don't know. Sometimes I look a little bit of envy over at CrossFit stuff. Maybe it'd be fun to do those salmon push-ups where you like heave yourself over the bar. But I don't know. I've always been kind of a form obsessive.
They're called kip pull-ups. But yeah, for me, I always do strict pull-ups. I would never do kip pull-ups.
Exactly. I'm a form nerd, man. You gotta do it right.
But I forgot to connect the two. But basically, this CrossFit idea of you need to continuously change the movements you're doing to build strength is not what these children are doing, where they stick to one sport. And the injuries that they're getting could be a result of that. It's like they're not using the rest of their body. Because there's like, I can actually visually tell when someone has done high school and or college sports as opposed to just worked out at the gym. Like there's something about how their necks move where it just looks so much stronger.
Actual like athletic physicality. Summer versus Winter Olympics. That's like I've always kind of, the appeal of the Summer Olympics is, I think.
Wait, is this something you think other people like about the Olympics?
This is my take. This is my spicy take on it, or a short bit, if you'll allow me. I think like the Winter Olympics is just a competition to see whose parents could like pay for the most time at Breckenridge, Colorado, basically. And so that can kind of bore people about that. People can kind of sense that. But like what we really want is the Summer Olympics, which is a competition. It's an index of how much of a genetic freak you are and how abusive your parents are. Basically, like you need to have both. Like they can kind of go up and down. You can be like this percentile of a genetic freak and then have very like nice parents, or you can just be like an average ability but really pushed over the edge by like, someone who should be in a mental hospital. But that's always like, that side people don't want to see. But that's what we want. Like, I'm so happy that they're out doing that so I can live my little normal life as they like, that's another thing is like Olympic athletes, what do they do after this? Like you got to pivot to motivational speaker, or small business owner or something, because you can't keep doing it forever into your 40s and 50s. Yeah. And stuff.
I mean, I think everyone always feels like time is running away from them, especially like Gen Z. It's like a bit of a complex with them. But yeah, I mean, the one thing to sort of feel like, oh, I didn't get to do that is be an Olympic athlete. But the odds are so small. Like, be kind to yourself. It's fine.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I did sports more. I think I'll get to that when I talk about gay divers. But sports do make me feel good. I think as a kid, I just wasn't into them because maybe a part of it was like my visual disorder. Like I can't catch balls, which is usually what like most people play in America is like they do team sports. But it was like, I think that the Olympics appealed to me even as a child, just from like the spectacle and the international nature, like all the things we just mentioned. It's like, even since I was a kid, I would be like, I want to watch the opening ceremony. Like I've never seen archery. That's cool. Like there's so many things going on. Like
it's with a fun little sampler platter for all these obscure sports and stuff. What's your favorite obscure sport?
Like what would I want to watch?
Yeah, entertainment value.
Trampoline.
Trampoline's wild.
Yeah,
trampoline is so good. I remember being in the hospital as a kid for something and just flipping through channels and then just arriving at like, this was not during the Olympics or anything. This is just off-season trampolining on like ESPN3. And I was just like transfixed. Like this should be on the ESPN1. This should be on the most important channel. This is so cool to watch.
It's a sport that I wouldn't want to do. I feel sad for anyone that's done it that has internal fears about injury because it's crazy. But it is like amazing to watch.
My heart goes out to track cycling. Such an obscure and very European sport. There's very few indoor velodromes in America where you can even like get into that. So I think we're very underrepresented.
There's one in Chicago.
It's not indoor. It's outdoor.
But we still have one.
It's in the suburbs.
Okay.
They're opening a, I saw this like out in the suburbs, like the deepest diving pool in America is going to be in the suburbs of Chicago. It could be a fun trip.
Yeah. But yeah, now we're kind of good with the anecdotes. Everyone's jazzed up. They know.
Now I can hit you with the history.
But we're going to go like through, first we're just going to go through the 5 most recent Olympic Games and just talk about like some highlights and lowlights and explore those a bit. But first, you mentioned your Catholic grandma went to Seoul.
Yeah. So on my mom's side, my aunt and uncle adopted a Korean kid. It was a very strange adoption. Like his parents weren't fully giving him up. They just wanted him to grow up in America and get the education and everything. And so our whole family went like Korea crazy because we loved Han so much. He's moved back to South Korea, but he did college here. Huge Michigan fan. Actually,
Do you still know him?
What? I'm not too much in contact with him, but his brothers are.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, my aunt always lists. She was like, you have 3 cousins on this side, and I was like doing the math. I was like, oh yeah, Han. Yeah, of course, yeah. But I think with a lot of time and money on her hands, my grandma decided to go to South Korea, and she came back with all this like just gear from it. I remember the weird little like, I don't know, early 2000s cartoony like they can read as like Japanese mascot-esque, but they're Korean. Yeah, the little like mascots they had for the games. I don't know. It was that kind of like early 2000s type of enthusiasm, that millenniarian.
Oh yeah,
fun. Yeah,
yeah. I think I wrote in the docket that one of the highlights of the 2004 Greek Olympic Games was that they had like a lot of fun in like a turn of the century way.
Yeah,
like
anything's possible.
Y2K energy, like there's Y2K aesthetics, which are just like futuristic, but then there's just like the joy and the optimism that came from the like, everyday people that were excited. And I feel like Greek people had this at the same time.
Yeah, it was like, they were so excited because it's of course their invention, and it was like, I think they saw it as like a good luck totem into entering, this new century, which didn't go very well for them. I feel like I've heard this take from a few people, but it's like people will say like, oh, Europeans will say this more because they're all kind of Greek skeptics, but like Greece invented democracy and then just coasted after that. And I like don't like, I was like, no, they're like a real functioning economy and all that. But I feel like anything I read about Greece's economy, it seems just like all the accusations are true, basically.
Yeah. But as I think I might have mentioned on a previous podcast, Athens is the new Berlin. So Berlin over the, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, like it was like, that was where all the creatives were moving. It was the creative capital of the world. People got kind of over it. Berlin, a lot of people have been there. And so at this point, a lot of those people are moving to Greece, like Sophie, the musician, who fell off a roof while looking at the moon in Athens and died. That was sort of heralding what was to come. And so there's still a lot of people moving there who are DJs and artists and creatives.
My friend saw the band Godspeed You Black Emperor live in Athens in like an ancient Colosseum. I'm so jealous of that. Like, and I was just surprised that they went there. But now that what you're saying about that, that's making sense. Yeah. I follow this, for some reason, this Instagram account like Nachtclub Berlin, which is just interviewing people in Berlin. And it's kind of sad. Like, it feels like it's just the stragglers now. Like the people who came there when it was hip 5-10 years ago and just acquired substance abuse issues and are just still there. And they always ask like, what do you love about Berlin? And it's so great. Like what they're talking about is nothing to do with like Germany, the country, or Berlin, like the people, the Germans who live there, anything about the country's characteristics. It's just a whole bunch of expats who decide to meet in one place and do drugs. Like, I don't think that is good for art for a short amount of time. And then it starts to eat itself.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the movie Party Monster. Have you ever seen it?
No.
It documents,
that's about the club kids, right?
Yeah, in New York.
Is there a Culkin in that?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
Macaulay Culkin is in that film. But towards the end of the film, or no, like halfway through, there are all of these characters who start emerging and they're just lame and people are dying and like it just like gets sad and boring. It's like, and I feel like that's probably what the people in Berlin experienced, where it's like they try to recreate that club kid lifestyle, go to Berghain, but then it just eats people up and kills people, and then you're left brain dead and can't do that much.
I had a friend who moved there, and I think she's left to go live in like the Southwest or something out there. Like I think there's a lot of photos of her with cacti now. I think it's just like a step. I think the way you should treat it is a little stepping stone. Like, oh yeah, I hope that it would be like, oh, like I was in Paris in the 1920s, that kind of thing. Right place, right time, but then leave right when everything starts to fall apart.
But and then a low light for the Greek Olympics was just that like it spawned the debt crisis, which like who knows what's going on with it, but it's like not resolved.
Yeah, I think Greece like feels this, has a little bit of a complex about the way that Europe looks down on it. And when they do these grand gestures like the Olympics, it's this kind of like, would a downward country do this? And then they throw this gigantic thing and get themselves into a debt crisis.
I don't think they were like downwardly mobile when they hosted the games.
Yeah.
I don't really
could have
know.
Felt ascendant. Yeah, there was a lot of like, this was a period of like the Celtic Tiger. Have you ever heard that? Which was Ireland's like economic rise out of nowhere. And so I think other European countries, like there was the Polish tiger, lightly, you could say.
Oh no, that's still Poland is on the up.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna, I mean, it's already sort of like becoming a powerhouse within Europe, but like I actually like, I learned TBH about the Athens being cool thing from like my DJ friend who lives in Montreal. She's very cool, but she's Polish. And I've seen Poland being hyped, like the Little Yachty song Poland, you know, there's also Podlasie Club in Chicago, this Polish nightclub. It's kind of the coolest spot to go. I mean, it's kind of
to
like
our eyes, you know.
I mean, it's not that it's not the coolest place to go still. I don't think there's any place that's sort of better, but it's just it can't be that eminent for so long. It's still like the place to go, I suppose, but like it's less exciting. But no, there's just like Poland is like putting its name on the map right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely see that. China, 2008, the Beijing Olympics.
Yeah. So for this one, you know, I watched the opening ceremony, and I think that the Olympic Games can happen at pivotal moments, you know. Greece right before the debt crisis, China really, I think, at its most exponential.
Yeah.
Like
in terms of year over year, like, economic and kind of cultural growth.
That was 2008, and they were like not in a recession still. They were still like outpacing the global economy.
Yeah.
But besides that, I think that the opening ceremony itself, I wasn't as inspired like watching it this time. It just kind of reminds me of like International Day at my school. Did you ever have that at your schools?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I went to...
I made falafel as a Jewish...
Oh, you had food. Oh, I meant like the dance competitions.
Oh, wow.
So,
I think we had that too, but yeah, we had like World Day. You choose a country.
Yeah, I went to an elementary school, Helen C. Pierce School of International Studies. Our special thing was that each year there would be a country that was picked, and we'd learn about that like all year long. But we also had like an international day for students where they'd just like dance, and there would be like a Vietnamese dance and then like a Latin one and different ones. My school was pretty much like all Latino. But it was like, yeah, the movements from that. And then also like my high school's International Day, because my high school had it as well. A lot of it is like the same, where it's like, oh, they're going to do the wave, but there's, you know, for the opening ceremony, it'd be 3,000 people doing the wave or something. And it looks a bit cooler, but like it's still, something about it is rudimentary at times. It's not as spectacular as I could have hoped. Yeah. Like I felt like, have you ever seen North Korea's mass Aryang Games?
Yeah, or just like the mass movement of people.
There's like how many thousands of people all working their butt off the whole time. Yeah. And like that is not the same as the opening ceremony. I feel like the Aryang Games are more impressive.
With the Beijing opening ceremony, what like stood out to me, like I still remember this, and I went back and I watched it, to celebrate the Chinese invention of the printing press. They had this like a chessboard of squares, and then each of the squares would lift up and down and make this shifting kinetic sculpture. And they would generate like a symbol, and they do like a wave form, doing the wave. Yeah. And they do this like ripple effects and all this like just interesting like geometric stuff. And at the end, like they reveal that under each square was a person like operating it, like lifting the top of it, all in like perfect unison. And it was very impressive. But I mean, as I was saying, like the opening ceremonies is a way for a country to tell its story to the global community, basically like where they were, where they're going, like who they are. And this was at a time where China was trying to say, like, no, we're not just the factory of the world churning out copycat creations. We're not just automatons. We are like a generative, creative, powerful, political, cultural force. And to show that, we're going to have 100 people act as little tiny machines, as little tiny automatons, literally as cogs inside a machine, a printing press, basically. So it just felt like there was this disconnect that was like preventing them from it's one thing to say that you want to be viewed as that, but then you are not doing anything to convey that.
There's also this part of the games where there's like a aristocratic looking woman who's walking on this giant sheet that a couple hundred people are holding up. And it's like the many supporting the few, but it just also makes people, just having so many people in uniform made them look dispensable. I mean, in contrast, you know, the Rio Olympic Games, big part of it was like them trying to present themselves as diverse. Like there's a whole speech this woman gives on diversity, and then there's like people that are not like aesthetically cohesive wearing all these like crazy outfits dancing. And so yeah, it does give off a different image.
London 2012.
I don't remember this one really. The only thing I really remember is like there's this news article which I'll put in as a link in the show description of this mystery woman who marched as part of the Indian contingent into the stadium. And she's just like waving, smile on her face, wearing like a fleece long sleeve. It does not fit. But like, I remember actually seeing her in the news, and like, I just have never gotten over it. Like,
yeah, just the confidence of just like, you just act like you belong kind of stuff.
Yeah. Do you remember the London Games?
So yeah, I was at summer camp for it, and that was always fun because we'd read out the scores and the medal counts for kids, and we'd have little Olympic themed kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like around it, like it just felt like the same kind of like, I don't know, the Olympic news cycle is just kind of this thing of like, oh, it's going to cost a crazy amount of money and they're going to build all this stuff, and what's it going to go to? And then it happens, and then, I don't know, like the world moves on kind of thing. And then it touches on whatever like political things are happening in that era. But I think this was a closing out of the cool Britannia period, which was the name for like the late 90s to early to mid 2000s, like British cultural rise, basically. Like this was following an economic rise. Something I didn't realize until like a few years ago was that like until the 90s and maybe the late 80s, like England was still trying to recover from World War II in terms of standard of living.
Yeah.
In high school, we watched this documentary where they forced a modern British family in the 2000s to live as though it was the 70s. And so they made their house smaller. They remodeled their house. They made these fake walls to give them the typical square footage of a British home back then. They simulated blackouts because there were coal blackouts at the time. Their food was 1970s stuff. And it's so crazy comparing that to like the riches that baby boomers knew in, I guess, pre-gas crisis, pre-recession 70s, that portion of the 70s, you know? It's just, yeah, we were living in huge palatial suburban homes, like driving gigantic cars. Like we were living in America, and over there, they were like rations were still happening in England. But so by the time we get to the cool Britannia period, this is like Spice Girls, David Beckham in sports, Alexander McQueen in runway fashion, like movies like Train Spotting, like all these like edgy, transgressive British movies. Yeah, they were really on top. And then by the time you get to 2012, like One Direction, I guess. Not exactly cool. Yes, culturally powerful as an export, but like it felt like they were losing their edge and just becoming this kind of like, it's a center of economic power, you know, it's a capital city in Europe. It's very expensive, and a lot of bankers live there and, you know, park their money in real estate. It just kind of felt like the end. Yeah,
I mean, there are a couple of statistics that sort of demonstrate how the UK is not as economically or culturally prominent as it once was. Like if you take away London from the rest of Britain, same GDP as Romania. London is a huge source of growth for the GDP of the UK because they deindustrialized. They don't have a economy really outside of that. And then because of that, like the GDP per capita over the last 10 years hasn't really risen in Britain. They're kind of stuck in the same place. And like me, when I was younger, I used to think like the UK and Canada were viable options if I were to try to move. And now it's like, I wouldn't even think twice about it. I'm staying here. Like I could get priced out and feel like I need to move to another country for a better life. I really don't see myself doing that, but like, that's not to piss off the listeners we seem to be getting from the UK and Canada, because we do get like a lot actually.
All right, I should.
But no, I feel like Canadians would be more sympathetic to me, being like, it's not the best situation because their housing crisis is way worse than here.
Yeah.
And they definitely are aware and acknowledge that.
I think they like to hear Americans not want to move there. I think they're tired of the refrain of like that we just think we get to go there once America gets too bad. You know, like every American sees that as like a totally feasible, like, you know, second thing. Like they'll totally take me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should say this now because we do have British listeners, but like, what are the British cultural exports now? Love Island. That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Idols. I like that band. They're good. They're on my list.
there's still like British movies. I don't know. Yeah. This is. I actually don't. I mean, I am a cultural connoisseur, but I cannot recall off the top of my head like recent British things I've seen.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the low light for London, I guess, was that their mascots and logo looked like trash. Do you remember them?
It was just a guy. What was he?
No, it's like pink. It kind of people. Did you ever see the Bart Simpsons meme? Where, if you know what I'm talking about,
see this guy.
I can't get that graphic, but
oh man, these guys suck. Wenlock and Mandeville.
Yeah, but no, I mean the logo I think is worse than the mascots, but yeah,
these are so like early 2000s.
Yeah,
I don't know. They're just really missing the mark. Oh, there it is, dabbing with Usain Bolt. 2012, man. 2012 was a powerful time.
Yeah.
And then Rio de Janeiro in 2016. This one I kind of passed by for me. I was also at summer camp for it. I don't know.
I happened to be in California in a motel room when this was happening, so I got to watch the ceremony and then some of the games. This was partly because like by this time in 2016 when Rio hosted the Olympics, like my family didn't have cable anymore. A lot of people didn't have cable, but I got the opportunity to see it. And I guess I was by that time in 2016, did I know Portuguese? I don't think I did, but like I was still excited about the Olympics, and that this might have also been like another push to get me into like learning Portuguese. But a big benefit of the games was like it helped Rio get infrastructure that it just simply needs, regardless of if it took on some debt. Like the city built more sewage treatment plants, and so like before the games, only like 17% of their sewage was treated. That went up to like 60%. That's just like a basic thing they need.
That's so wild. They had to wait for like international attention or to like improve that. Like, I mean, it's whatever brings improvement, but it's hard not to be cynical about that.
In the Southern Hemisphere, though, like a lot of infrastructure projects are more expensive, costly, difficult to build, like because of the humidity or the temperature. Yeah. There is what's called the Brazil cost, which is like a long list of reasons why it's more expensive to do business in Brazil. It's fascinating to look at, but like infrastructure is hard to build there. And then they also like, I don't think they built their metro system from scratch for the games, but like they extended them significantly. So that's good. You have any highlights on Brazil's games?
The Brazil one? I don't really have much, no. I just remember there was that one kerfuffle with like some athletes from the U.S. team. Like Ryan Lochte was up to no good, like in Rio, right? What did they do?
He was, as a famous meme once said, he's like if Wrigleyville was a person. Yeah. No, what happened with that was like,
it's true, bro.
He was at a gas station. Nothing bad happened, but then he started to tell people he was robbed there, and he disgraced himself really badly by doing that. But then a low light from the Rio games was that, Brazil wanted to be excited about this, but they didn't really get to just because they're having so much turmoil. They wanted to be proud, but like they were in this recession that was making it hard. And the games didn't really cause the recession. No. They don't seem like some people might be able to make the case, but like, yeah, it's not like a big reason why Brazil's economy had some trouble, but yeah.
I assume that these were always kind of a loser economically. Olympics, and they are nowadays. The past few have really been, but this was not always the case. You used to make money on these. I thought it was kind of like, I thought it was just seen as like a fair trade, of like we build all this, we do all this and stuff like that. But like, hey, we hosted the Olympics. Not every city can say that.
It's one of those things though, where like I'm sure if you look at it a certain way, like they'll say like, I actually don't like these statistics where they say like, for every dollar spent in the library, it spurs like $20 of growth in the community.
Those are very like new liberal kind of views of libraries. Like, no, they're just an inherent good.
I can kind of see how that's true for me though, because even if I help like one person a day with a job application, that makes a difference in the economy.
Huge multiplier, yeah.
So yeah, but I'm not a fan of those. But no, there are like external effects that like are beneficial, just like making everyone look at your country every day for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We're not going to forget.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. And I was just breezing through like the write-up on the Rio Olympics, and it seems like there was a lot of like high-minded kind of goals for it that didn't super come through. And they're kind of heartbreaking. One of them was like, oh, the handball court was designed so that afterwards they can disassemble it and then use it to build schools. It didn't happen or anything. Like none of that ever happened, but it was designed for that. And I felt like a lot of Rio was those like big promises, and then I guess the Brazil cost coming in and things just not really materializing.
Not to give yet another anecdote, but like another thing they built for the games was the Museu do Amanhã, the Museum of the Future, which was kind of a money sink. It's like actually not as impressive as it sounds. The building itself is extremely architecturally detailed. It's very cool. But like I actually went inside and saw the exhibit, and it was just like very flashy. It wasn't really a museum. It felt more like, a selfie museum.
Oh, that's what I was going to guess, if it was like a wonder museum type of thing. Just like
No, it was a bit better than that. It was educational, but it was, you don't need that much space for what they're exhibiting. It was off.
Interesting.
But then they put a lot of money into that. And then the main, I don't actually know the name for this one, but the main like social science museum for Brazil burned like a few years later to the ground, and like very serious things were lost in that, like entire archives of indigenous languages that there now really aren't records of. Like the oldest skeleton found in Brazil was in there. Like really big pieces of human history were lost when that happened. But we can finish off with Tokyo. So this one actually you probably can remember more than me.
I don't know why I wasn't into this during the time. What was I doing in summer 21, right?
Well, I think what happened was COVID. Like,
yeah, there's too much going on. Like they were holding it, but it was super weird and stuff was the crowds were empty. The stands were empty. That's what it was. Like at every event. That's not fun to watch. I bought a pair of weightlifting shoes during this, and they are like Adidas special for the 2020 Olympics. And I like them. They're very like retro styled. They got a little like cartoon of a Japanese guy with his thumb up. And I like that. It says 2020 on it. Like that was one of the cost saving measures. They didn't like relabel stuff, and they didn't like burn any.
I mean, even on the Wikipedia page, even though it's like the Olympic Games happened in 21, it's still the like whatever Olympiad. They didn't like adjust the years.
Oh yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, technical difference. I was wrapped up with my life. I don't really remember these at all. One thing I do remember is the saga with Sha'Carri Richardson. Did you ever hear about her?
Yeah, Sha'Carri Richardson, track and field athlete.
She had such like a sincere and warm vibe. Like I don't really care about athletes. I don't have relationships with them, but she just felt like a real person. I think maybe it's partly just because like she feels like someone I would meet in Chicago. Like she's not some like suburban girl. So like I really like her. I really hope that she does get to go to the next games. Yeah.
You noted that like the stadiums they built for this were really pretty.
Yeah. But there's plenty of pretty buildings out there. There is one that's like very beautiful, the Gymnasium specifically. But yeah, that's what I was grasping for, someone who had no interaction with the Tokyo Games.
I looked at those, and they are very good. They're just very tasteful. Apparently there was a plan for a really zany Zaha Hadid style stadium. It was going to be very organic and flowing, like all of her stuff. They said it looked like a bicycle helmet, and people hated it. They got rid of it. And I think a lot of the stuff that was built could be called New Formalist, which is like a subset of mid-century modern architecture. That's like what the World Trade Center was, and that was designed by a Japanese architect, Minoru Yamasaki. I just think the Japanese are very good at New Formalism. It's all about taking like classical forms and then modernizing them and streamlining them, which is great for Olympic architecture, because that's the thing that's like trying to look to the future, but also like hold on to its Greek past. Yeah, it's a good fit.
Yeah. So we just wrapped up talking about, the 5 most recent Olympic Games, rest in peace. And then we're going to be talking now about like one of our urbanist like pastimes. I'm sorry. We're never going to do an episode on public transit, but we're going to talk about it like every other episode. Mm-hmm. It's just my forte. And so we're going to talk about just some metro systems in the US that were built for Olympic Games or expanded during Olympic Games, or they would have been expanded during Olympic Games if they did get to host the games. We're just going to talk about 3. We're going to talk about Salt Lake City, Chicago, and Los Angeles. And so I didn't have to research any of this. I just wrote it in the docket. I knew all of this off the top of my head.
My man.
Yeah. So it is typical for like cities to expand public transit in advance of the games so that the city can handle more people. Beijing actually added 125 miles of subway lines in advance of hosting the 2008 games, which is crazy because like Chicago's system is like 105 miles.
Yeah, they built the CTA in 2 years.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's crazy.
But yeah, we can talk about Salt Lake City first. So Salt Lake City hosted the Winter Olympics in 2002. Which, fun fact, I think I mentioned this somewhere else in the docket, but like there's a lot of corruption for that one. Like people went to jail for bribing IOC officials. But Salt Lake City prior to 2002, yes, they had like a streetcar network like, decades ago, but they had nothing to begin with besides the bus system before the games. And so they rebuilt a system with 44 miles of track and 51 stations. And it's like a full-fledged system. It goes to the airport.
I didn't know about this. Yeah. I had no idea.
It's well reviewed actually by urbanist YouTubers like RM Transit. Like all the ones that visit there like it. It's like it's like a right fit size. It's not overbuilt. It's not underbuilt. Yeah. It's like actually not humiliating to use if you live there.
Dignified. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just know this was like the villain origin story of Mitt Romney. He was involved in this. He was the mayor at the time or something of Salt Lake City, and just the national political stage was really wowed by this Mormon guy, like really putting together a great Olympic Games. I didn't know that people then went to prison for corruption. That is, I don't know. We can talk about this in a later when I get to talk about my little fascination with the Olympics. But the IOC is just such like a famously corrupt organization.
Yeah.
And there's a certain vibe that is like European corrupt bureaucrat that I honestly kind of respect in its aesthetics. I think about FIFA too. So they get like shit all the time for being just blatantly corrupt.
They're definitely worse than the Olympics.
Yeah, they are. But then also like just UN officials and stuff. There's like, what is that, UN speak or something, which is like the weird jargon that just comes about from all these like 5 language polyglots, like all working together professionally. So everyone uses these weird terminologies. And also like, as you just think about like, as less and less jobs require suits and stuff, I feel like the final things that need suits are people who aren't often trusted, but need you to trust them more. Yeah. So I think that in 40 years, when even less people wear suits and ties in the Olympics, those guys, like those little like committee people or whatever, are still going to be suited and booted. Like they're going to be fully trying to win you over because there's just an instant lack of trust, I think, for the IOC committee.
Yeah. And then there's Chicago. So for this one, we'll get to talk about the Circle Line. You're familiar with it, right?
Oh, yeah. Everyone like independently comes up with this. Like even people who aren't into transit in Chicago, they're always like, it's just kind of annoying how every line just has to go downtown. I wish there was one that went in like a circle, Like people just kind of get there. And everyone loves the idea of a Circle Line. They just wonder where to put it, where to draw the circle.
Yeah. There's a difference though between a circumferential line and then a just line.
Yeah.
Because the circle lines in general, they can work, but this was going to be interlined, which means like when 2 lines share the same track, which happens all the time in Chicago, like or the brown and purple lines share tracks or the green and pink lines share tracks, the whole loop is interlined. That's like one big knot. What they were going to do with this is they're going to have 3 phases. So it's going to be like reconnecting the pink line to the green line. That actually happened. That's how the pink line happened. It was actually a branch of the blue line before. They rebuilt what was called the Polina connector, so that like elevated track connecting the pink and green lines that goes by the Allstate Arena, right?
United Center?
The United Center, sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That goes by the United Center. That was completed actually. So they completed phase 1. Phase 2 was then going to go from the pink line to orange and to red. The final phase, which was the hardest, this was what killed the project. It was going to go north and then east from where the green and pink lines split. It was going to go there to like blue line and the red line and stuff like that.
So much there. There's so much in the way there that would be so hard to build.
The reason, though, why I think it's a bad project, and it was good that it was not actually built, was because it was going to be interlined with the red line specifically. Mm-hmm. The red line's our busiest line, like over 100,000 people use it per day. Right now, I think it's about like 125,000 people use it per day. Wow. But like, you don't mess with that. Like, you cannot share tracks.
Yeah. It's hardly functioning right now as they've been modernizing it. But
no, it's not even just that. It's just like the frequency of the red line would have to be cut if they did that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a good idea.
It's a powerhouse line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was, I don't know. I wasn't in Chicago yet in this period. Whenever it briefly comes up, people are so grateful it didn't happen. Maybe it's a sour grapes kind of thing. But I just think that we don't trust our politicians to handle it in Chicago either, because we're so famously like full of graft and self-serving and stuff. We're just like, no, you can't trust the older people with this. You can't trust the mayor with this. Like, we would just bungle it, which is so sad. But they were going to do something like they'd have the Olympic villages in the Michael Reese Hospital site, which is this abandoned hospital pretty close to the lake on the south side, on the near south side. It's a very valuable chunk of land. Still nothing has been done with it. There's some big pie in the sky plan for it. But it's one of those like interesting little remnants of when there was like a Jewish population on the south side. Michael Reese was a Jewish guy.
Yeah. The Chicago Olympics, as a child, my dad, I remember him expressing many times that like we shouldn't host it. It will bankrupt the city. Another complaint was that we have a lot of available lakefront land, and like one of the few things we're willing to give that up for is public places like Soldier Field, actually, the Art Institute. And so there's enough precedent that they could have built Olympic stadiums along the lakefront, which I think that sounds kind of like NIMBY behavior. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But I do think that there was risk in hosting the games. What I was looking at is like not all games actually bankrupt a city or like cause severe debt. There are examples where like cost overruns are really, really high, and then that's a problem for a long time. But like, I think that China broke even, went over a little bit. Like, it's not destined to drain your pockets. But like, I think the fear with people about why Chicago couldn't host it is just because of corruption. One of the ways that corruption happens is through contracts and bids. So like, for example, a lot of aldermen in Chicago, they have small businesses. That's why I oftentimes am like, oh, small politics, all these greedy small business owners. It's because like they already make bank, they already have a lot of control, and then they want to get in office, have more control, and get paid $200,000 a year. Yeah. I'm fine with that salary, but not for people who are already wealthy. Like that's why I'm so skeptical of it.
It's fine for me and you when we become aldermen, in Chicago.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's why it's just like they'd be getting their friends the contracts to build these huge stadiums, and like that's probably why they were nervous about that.
Los Angeles?
Yeah. Have you been there?
Yeah, I used to go there more, like definitely when I lived in Las Vegas, but I have a cousin who lives out there, and I would visit. I'm a little bit of an LA urbanism apologist is what I'd say. LA culture, hardline. I think it's troubling. I don't know. I just don't
like
think
diets.
Oh, I don't like diets. Did you say that is their culture? Yeah, it's just being on a diet and bringing your dog everywhere. Those are two things that I think are annoying.
I still think about how Brontez Fernell on his most recent Red Scare episode said like his fat girl food is a burrito, and then they were like, that sounds so healthy.
Yeah, a burrito.
Yeah. He's a Californian. On LA, they're going to be hosting the 2028 Olympics after Paris. And so they've had a little bit of a metro system for a while, like the A line from Long Beach to downtown. That was built in the 90s. And then the D line and the B line, which are actually subway systems or heavy rail underground.
So that's what it must have taken.
Those were started in the 90s. I think the last expansions were around like 2000. But the whole system's expanding a lot. Like, even since the last time I was there, about like a year ago, they now have a regional connector, which connected several light rail lines through a tunnel downtown. So it's really exciting that this is a place where transit's getting built in North America, or specifically the United States, because in the US, There's currently only two cities building heavy rail lines, Honolulu and LA. Those are the only active projects. So like, I'm really grateful that this is happening. I think the D line extension in particular will be very successful, but they're also sort of like not planning their lines that well. Like the Pink Line, for example, or the K Line got renamed. That one, it has 2 people movers as a new line.
Oh man, that's like the Skokie Swift. That's like the yellow line has 2 cars.
Yeah,
right?
but it's not even just that they're going to have to pay more for the people movers. It's like, that is such a bad sign of poor planning. If you had one, that's okay, but they have to have 2, one to SoFi Stadium, the other to the airport. At least one of those they should have been able to pull off. So it's not good that they did that.
All right, I'm looking at a map of this now, and this makes sense. Because when I went to LA, I took public transit everywhere, and I was like, wow, what a great modern city. And then I talked to anyone, and they told me that's not the experience there. And so I was staying in Koreatown, which is very well served. They have 2 stops on this, what I'm going to call a purple line, because that's the color on Google Maps.
Yeah, when I went to LA, I was centrally located. I stayed actually along 7th Street, or do they call it 7th Avenue? I think it's 7th Street, right where there's like a major station that connects a lot of lines. I was at the Freehand Hotel. I highly recommend that brand, actually. I love their hotels. And I was able to get around just fine. But yeah, I think that like many people, they actually, when they say don't take public transit, they're not speaking from experience. They haven't been taking the system. Like seriously, don't listen to them. Because as a tourist, the metro system serves all the tourist destinations pretty well.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about, this feels like a YouTube video essay thing, but now let's talk about the dark side of the Olympics.
Yeah. I love joining that word with other terms. We need to get like a dark urbanism episode.
Urbanism. Yeah. Evils of urbanism.
Yeah, sorry for my train rant. And now, so I think one to start out with is just that it's not grassroots.
Yeah.
This one's the least deleterious, but this just goes against our general ethos where it's like,
yeah, we're all about the bottom up, like self-directed, city built by many hands, that kind of broad stuff. But this is something that, like, if anything has to be top down, it should be this, the international sporting competition.
Yeah. I wrote this down not in the construction, but instead the like advocacy to host the Olympics, because it's always like the mayors or the officials deciding to host the Olympics. It's not really up to a vote usually.
Mm-hmm. It just gets put on people. Yeah, it's never voted. That didn't even cross my mind that like you'd have a referendum on that.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting. I don't know. That'd just be another hurdle though towards hosting a city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we talked about it earlier, but IOC corruption. Yeah, there's just so many moving parts to it. Like you think about the IOC is made of all these subcommittees that are like individually run in each country. So it's just like something is bound to go wrong. There's opacity. There's like funds being handed around, and there's like just I don't know. It's a politics inside itself. It's an outside of, it was a paragovernmental like complex. It's like an NGO in a way.
Yeah, there's a lot of officials who are making over $1 million a year that work for the IOC, which is a lot by our standards, but by European standards, think about it.
That'd be good. That'd be living good. And then I'd like to hop to my little fascination thing, which is when you talk about the dark side of Olympics, you have to talk about doping and steroids, or what I'm just going to broadly call PEDs, performance enhancing drugs. That's the most useful umbrella term to all that. Steroids is kind of a misnomer. I think they're always going to show up. They're always going to be like a part of it. Like these people will give up anything to win. Why wouldn't they then like go for drugs? But there's an interesting take on this is from Clarence Kennedy, who's a weightlifting YouTuber that I'll watch. He's famous for his just insanely heavy lifts, his really good form, his like depth in all of his lifts. And he puts he would compete, but he would like never be on the Olympic path. Basically, he was never competing in competitions that had put him there. People always wondered about it, and people also always wondered if he was natural or not. He was just great physical development. And then he made a long form video basically saying like, no, the Olympics is corrupt. Like everyone is doping, and I'm on steroids, and like it's just a sham to be in it basically. And the IOC is just the testing system makes things more dangerous. And what he goes to talk about is that like when you have a testing system that's either random or you have these scheduled tests right before your competition, it starts to, people prioritize drugs that get in and out of your system faster. And that's like the weird experimental, like there's talk of like different, like Russia and China using these like tailor-made PEDs that are like built for your DNA and stuff. And those are very experimental. And testing is done like by these countrywide subcommittees, and countries vary wildly in their takes on like PEDs. In Japan, it's treated like a heavy drug, like heroin. You can go to prison for any kind of possession of that. Clarence Kennedy believes, and I believe that like, I think all Japanese athletes are natural. Actually, that might just be a cope on my part, but I really think they're serious about it. Netherlands, I've heard that police officers go to gyms, and if you're too big, they'll like take you aside and like not test you on the spot, but they'll like start a case open on you because if you're a user, you might be a distributor.
Damn, they're trying to put hot guys down.
Exactly, all those 6'5" built Dutch guys. And then in Egypt, there's absolutely no laws regarding these. You can buy them from corner stores. You can buy testosterone and everything.
I think you could in Mexico at some point.
Yeah,
I watched
Mexico
this Netflix documentary, Killer Sally, where she was a female bodybuilder, had a bodybuilder husband, and she would go down to Mexico with her kids in the car to go get steroids.
Yeah, no, yeah. I've seen signs of it, of just like, they just have like photos of superheroes and stuff, and it's like, buy anabolicos here. So I don't know. In terms of what should actually happen, I don't know if I can really speak that firmly on it, but I can tell you that if performance-enhancing drugs were legalized, strength athletes would all take a little bit of testosterone, some HGH, maybe insulin, but not much else outside of that. Cardio athletes stuff they don't really need like that stuff too much, but people would take the normal, well-studied, safer kind of things. But that would just, it's never going to happen. The Olympics are not going to allow that. They're not going to like...
Yeah, they shouldn't.
Because part of the spirit of amateurism is that like, we also try and tell ourselves that these sports are healthy and that we're viewing very healthy people. And it's just not true for a lot of sports. It varies wildly sport by sport. But like one of the Olympians I really liked was Siamand Rahman, who was a Paralympian. He was like a weightlifter, and he's just polio, so no use of his legs. So he just did the bench press. Insanely sized human being. He weighed 375 pounds, basically. And he died of a cardiac episode a few years ago before his next. And he was within like spitting distance of breaking the general bench press world record, which is crazy because he has no use of his legs. But yeah, you think he was healthy like at that weight, like, yeah, or anything? Yeah.
Especially like because the weight's not being added to his legs.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a crazy distribution. The photos of him are wild. Yeah, and of course there's variation in like state doping programs. Like I haven't seen Project Icarus, but like the Russian doping program is pretty nefarious. Is what I'd say.
They're never not in trouble.
Yeah, like, they're always getting into stuff.
Just looking at every single Olympic Games, I was like going to the controversy section. It was always like something about Russia. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay. But no, I think they do need to do something about it. Steroids, I mean, there's like, I've heard Joe Rogan very casually be like, yeah, I'm on steroids. Mm-hmm. It's like, I do think less of you as a person if you're on those. You don't look as good. You're destroying your health. It's like, it's also, I mean, this is also just from my perspective as someone who doesn't use substances, I think. That's no, actually, I'm now realizing a lot of my animosity towards steroids is just from that perspective. Mm-hmm. I don't believe in enhancement in that way. Yeah. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It does feel bad because different people like receive PEDs differently. Like some people can really like their body can like metabolize them basically better than most. And that would just be such a sad metric to like grade Olympians on. Like he's good, but he didn't take well to the steroids. There was, I forget what baseball player this was, but I was looking up like my old heroes back when I was a Diamondbacks fan as a child in Arizona. And one of them was Luis Gonzalez. Yeah, Luis Gonzalez, like he was very good in the early 2000s and he kind of fell off. And one of the theories is that he wasn't ever good. He was just a really good responder to steroids during the period where steroids were like not well tested in the MLB. And then once they finally cracked down on it, he was kind of brought down to size to everyone else. He didn't really have the natural talent. He was just a super responder. I hope that's not true. But yeah, it's like we want, what do I want in my Olympian? I want grit. I want drive. I don't want like, wow, his body really responds well to exogenous hormones. Like that's just not great.
I mean, I also just like risking death seems to be against my principles. Mm-hmm. It's like in every way. It's just like if you're taking a gamble in that to that degree, it's like I just think it is an affront to God.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, but that's like there's any level of risk, you know. I mean, but steroids are a pretty discreet one. Yeah, pretty like yeah.
No, I mean, there's plenty of things that are like moderate risk where it's like, yeah, it's fun to go swim in the river. Yeah. I don't, you know.
But like your aversion to cycling, is this out of that fear that it's an affront to God?
I guess so.
Is that above your dangerousness threshold?
I suppose so. I think it's also just that I don't have the capability. Mm-hmm. My reaction times are not good. But yeah, no, that was sort of, my subconscious got out there. I didn't intend to say all that, but it's okay. Yeah.
It leapt out of you. Do you think if we had an empty parking lot, we could go biking?
Yeah.
All right.
I actually went biking along a trail with my cousin a few years ago. Like I can, it's just mostly like walking is so nice. Riding the train is so nice. I don't need anything else.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
You kind of got into, Siaman, Rahman. Mm-hmm. What other Olympians are your favorites?
So I don't know. I love Naim Suleymanoglu, who was a Turkish weightlifter, 4'10", and I just love like a pound for pound weightlifter. I think that's really cool. Like,
yeah.
What was it? Yeah, he clean and jerked, which is where you lift over your head 3 times his body weight, which is insane. But yeah, and he had a rivalry with a Greek weightlifter, so big like nationalist thing tied up into that, but then they embraced each other when Naim won. And so that really bowls me over. I'm very like easily swayed by like, I don't know, people putting aside nationalism. That's like the idea of the Olympics, is that, like Greeks and Turks put aside their weapons and hug. But yeah.
I wish they actually hugged. Do they do that?
They hugged, yeah.
Oh,
it's a competition, yeah.
No, I thought you meant all the time, like all Olympians hug.
Yeah, no.
Sorry.
And then, so I was actually a big Oscar Pistorius fan before he killed his girlfriend. I was like, oh man, that is truly like overcoming adversity and all that. But his story, like it's become this true crime story. He got drunk, he murdered his girlfriend. But then after that, like if you interviewed anyone at the time, he was just known to be insane. He was just known to be like have some substance issues and to go kind of off the handle at the drop of a hat. He would like drive around with his friends in like rough neighborhoods and shoot guns out the window. Like this was all like semi-public knowledge ahead of the allegations, but like you couldn't trust the American mind to be like, oh yeah, that inspirational guy with no legs who's running in the Olympics, he's also like an insane person. It's just like that there wasn't room in the copy for that. So we didn't accept it until like it became until it developed.
Yeah. That's my kind of chaotic, honestly. But yeah.
All right, your Olympians?
Yeah, I did a whole like spiel on gay divers. So as I mentioned in the Sea Punk episode, I was a diver in high school, and there happens to be a lot of gay Olympic divers, 3 in particular that were like Olympic gold medalists. And so I kind of looked up to them when I was like younger in different ways. But if you actually like tabulate like the number of gay athletes and how well they performed in the games, they statistically done like better than like most other countries, if not all other countries. It's like there aren't that many gay athletes, although there's more each games that happens now. But the gay athletes that do, say they're gay, they do really well, which made me really proud as like a gay youth. It's like, it's just everywhere you look, like gay people across history, like overperform, have a lot of power, like change the world. It's always like very inspiring. Yeah. I don't have a reason to like need to feel gay pride now, but when I was younger, it actually still like meant something.
Yeah, I think it is one of those things like when you're a kid, you need like things to look up to. And I don't know. It's not that you can't look up to someone that's like not your exact demographics or something, but it's nice to have like one bit of overlap with someone.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the best little boy in the world phenomenon?
I looked into that. I looked into the author, Andrew Tobias. I didn't read like an excerpt or anything.
Yeah. So it's this idea that like young gay boys, like if they sense their sexuality is held against them basically, and like often effeminate traits and things like that, they compensate in other ways by trying to excel in academics or in the arts or something else where they can achieve like the validation that they are deprived of due to other parts of them. And I think that I think it's an interesting condition.
Yeah.
I just think it's weird because I think I had a little bit of that as a straight boy who was just kind of a wimp, I think, as a kid. I just tried to excel in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely exhibited that where like I went to like a very good high school that had a 2% acceptance rate. And at this point now, I know of like a lot of the guys, there were only like 100 guys in my class, but if I actually counted it, I know that like 20 or 25 are gay.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
which is very like impressive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not that they were out at the time and said I was the freak for coming out. And they all held it in and were normal and well-adjusted. Yeah, to get back to the Olympians. So there's 3 gay divers who are Olympic gold medalists. I'll like talk a little bit about them. Greg Louganis, a bit older. He actually like was a diver during the midst of the AIDS crisis. He contracted HIV. There's a controversy where he was doing a dive, probably a reverse dive, I think hit his head, and then got blood in the water. Mm-hmm. Caused a lot of controversy once that was found out about like how people contract HIV and like if he put other athletes at risk. Mm-hmm. But I think he's still alive. This was before they had like a lot of drugs that could help suppress HIV. Mm-hmm. But like probably because he was just he was an athlete who was so active, he survived. And then there's Matthew Mitchum, and this diver I was aware of when I was a diver because I think he won his gold at Beijing, in 2008. And so yeah, he was a diver in the games that happened before I started diving, which was around 2016. And he was an Australian diver, won a gold, and also did crack.
Oh man, can't be doing that.
But no, it's honestly kind of crazy that these divers were winning golds, one with HIV, the other on crack.
Yeah,
but no, they probably drug test at the Olympics. I don't know if it did. It was.
I think crack gets out of your system pretty fast.
Okay. Anyways, don't do that. Crack is bad. Yeah. And then the last one is Tom Daly, which you probably heard of, right?
I'm trying to think. I'm sure when I look him up, he'll come to me.
He's a diver that people, gay guys actually were kind of infatuated with him before he even like publicly revealed he's gay. But
no British man should be that tan.
That's the thing is he has such like a mid-2000s standard of beauty. He's like hairless, clean shaven. His hair's always like flipped up, like he's wearing gel. He is like he has a tan. He has teeth that look like he like thinks about whitening them. Like that, like sort of male standard of beauty from like 2006. He just has that naturally.
He's frozen in that. Yeah.
Yeah. I personally don't find any of these men attractive, but yeah, I did look up to them. I guess I still do. This episode did make me a bit nostalgic, but I'm not a diver. I don't associate with that anymore.
And then sports in general. It comes up pretty rarely, I'd say, in our podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You actually are an athlete though. Like your take on sports isn't as like skeptical as mine. Like you actually like doing them. Yeah.
So I love rugby. This is entering my 3rd year of doing it. And we play 2 seasons a year. So I feel like I'm really building up experience and stuff. I like that it has like a continuous play. When the ball hits the ground, it's not dead. There are still stoppages in play. Often like if you throw a ball forward or accidentally knock it forward, we have these set pieces that restart play. Some people don't like that side of rugby union. That's the rules that I play. In rugby league, there's less stoppages and it's more fast paced. But I kind of like the old school.
Yeah.
Rugby union, I think, is truer to the original game.
It sounds like there's probably less injuries.
No. Rugby league I think it's faster, and I'd say the athletes are more well-rounded. You don't get those like lumbering kind of guys you'll get sometimes in union. But yeah, just like the Olympics, rugby kind of struggles with its amateur spirit as well. So rugby union and league split off. In rugby league, if you injured yourself in a game, they would then pay for your lost wages. So if you were a plumber or something, like, and you injured yourself in rugby, you couldn't play, you would then get paid those wages. Rugby union saw that as like ruining the amateur spirit of the sport and refused to do it for a while. And so that's why it became the more posh rugby, basically, because like, I have not an email job, but I have a like management job. So the many times I've injured myself in rugby, I'm able to go to work without any like, missing any days or anything. And there's like a Chicago lawyers like team. You know, they can injure themselves extensively and still show up for court the next day. But amateurism like ended in rugby in the 90s. They actually fully professionalized and they allowed the payment of players, and that just like skyrocketed kind of the money in the sport. And that's where we are nowadays. But yeah. You had a quote from Fran Lebowitz about sports. I don't think about her in sports ever.
Yeah, one time I went on a date and like this guy made me watch like 6 episodes straight of like the Fran Lebowitz series. So I know a lot about her and her quotes. One fun fact about her is that she actually reminds me of my mom. People would not think that. She does not seem maternal. Yeah. But my mom was kind of a tomboy. Like she wore a man's wedding ring. She like would wear suits with my dad. My dad has kind of strange taste in women. But yeah, my mom was very like intense, very like forward, strongly opinionated. I feel like I'm kind of like that in the same way. And Fran Lebowitz is like that as well. There's a lot to not like about her. I don't think anyone, doesn't feel like affronted by some of the things that she says. Yeah. But one of the things she said that I did like was just that there is a temporary value in sports where a lot of the value comes out of the suspense, and then that goes away once the game is over. There are people who do rewatch old sports games, but they don't make sense, especially to me as someone who like doesn't watch sports. For the people who are not as really sports people, they just like all synchronize and somehow have the same ideas, where I'm sure like everyone else would also be like, yeah, like why would you rewatch a game? But another take I have on sports that's a bit more positive is just like, I do like being in stadiums. Like the audio sounds really cool. Like all the echoes, the booms, the crowd cheering, just listening and being there. It creates what's called a collective effervescence. Have you ever heard that term?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when moving or shouting or speaking with other people, you start to like amplify emotions. Like emotions are like essentially meant to be shared. Like when you feel something and you express it, other people feel the same feeling. But yeah, it is really exciting being in a stadium.
Yeah, we're going to Polish Heritage Night for the White Sox.
You're gonna dox us. People are gonna find us.
I'm not gonna tell them what stands we're in. There's gonna be tons of people.
I know
there.
It's too big. Yeah,
but yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. I would, as I said, like I'm kind of late in life to team sports, definitely.
Yeah.
But I grew up going to baseball games with my family in Arizona. As I said, Diamondbacks were on the up and up back then. Phoenix was a very new Sunbelt city, and suddenly it had won a World Series. So we were really riding high on that. But now I'm a White Sox fan. I love baseball because it's uniquely American and weird, and it's esoteric. It didn't have a clock. Now there's like a pitch clock kind of thing. You have to throw your pitch within 15 seconds or something for the first one. So that speeds things up a little bit. But I like that it has a system of manners, which is maybe the lamest reason to like a sport. But it's like there's this gentlemanliness that does feel a little British, I have to say. Maybe in the rugby has some weird bits like this too. Like you cheer for the opposing team scoring a try and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, in baseball, you don't run up the score if you're doing well. You kind of like hold yourself back a bit. You don't just like make a blowout. You set the bat down lightly after a good hit, and especially after a home run, and you don't look at your home run too much because that's seen as showy. But yeah, and then if a rookie makes his first major league home run, you ignore him and you act like nothing happens. When he gets back to the dugout, you don't do any celebration or anything. I like the stuff that kind of gets into superstition a bit. But yeah, I don't know. And the food, and I don't know.
Yeah, you like hot dogs.
I love hot dogs. Big hot dog guy. Big hot dog appreciator.
Yeah.
And you can also get a Cuban sandwich at the White Sox stadium, and it's really good when they don't just cheap on the meat sometimes, which they often do.
Maybe I'll get that then when I go this summer. One thing I also realized when thinking about American professional sports is like all the professional sports, none of them are solo sports, right? I guess there's golf. All right. Yeah, I feel like the gay sports are all like solo sports. Literally all of them. Like if you compare like the sports, well, okay, for lesbians, they really like soccer. There's a lot of like female lesbian Olympic soccer players, but the gay sports that had the most Olympians were like diving, swimming, equestrian events, and figure skating.
Yeah, solo sports I also jokingly call the Jewish sports too, because that's the only ones that we do nowadays, because you can't because I'm just speaking broadly. This is not the case for everyone. Jews only really see sports as means to get academic scholarships.
Yeah.
And so you should just do ones where you're not beholden to the performance of other people you can't control. And so we just do tennis and swimming. Sometimes I've noticed that, which can be individual and a team sport. But yeah. And then I think Asian immigrants share this spirit as well. I could be overreaching on that, but my friends have agreed with me in terms of Jews and Asians both being drawn to tennis for its accountability, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. For me, I wish I did more sports growing up. I really like working out. I guess it was always, the problem with me was just most of the sports available involved balls, which I now know I just can't see like that well because of my visual thing. I actually see normal. I'm not meaning to like over exaggerate it to make you think I can't do a lot of things, but like one thing is just like if a ball's coming at me, it's actually kind of difficult for me to process.
I can really picture that actually. So I'm sorry, Nathan. Yeah, I cannot.
Yeah, I'd be
imagine.
like, what?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Sorry,
but yeah,
but I wish I did more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'll get some final injury in rugby that forces me to choose another sport. But I don't know. I'm going to see how far this rabbit hole goes.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we've got the Olympics coming up this summer. I feel like I'm gonna not let it catch you by surprise this year. I'm gonna try and like actually watch like the torch ceremony, the opening ceremonies, all that. I can't really host people in my studio, but maybe.
But you don't have live TV, do you?
No, but I imagine they're gonna put it on streaming stuff. No,
but it's always like kind of convoluted. It's like you have to have a cable
TV provider and all that.
I mean, they probably are making it easier each year, but
yeah, I imagine someone like Peacock or Apple TV will grab it, and just put it on there.
My sister actually has live TV, and she has a TV in every room of her house.
Is this like much older sister, like Gen X sister?
Yeah, she's a cuspy between like Gen X and millennial, I think. But she, that's one of the more wild things about her. It's like her house is. I mean, pretty much every time I go to any of my family members' houses, I'm like, all right, dang, you live like this.
Oh my God. Do you think there's any chance your family could listen to the podcast? What are they going to think about that?
I mean, I'd love if they called me out for this. I don't think they are.
That would mean they're listening.
But no, I mean, with her though, it's always just like, you really do have a TV. She doesn't have TVs in the bathrooms, but like, that's it.
Yeah. One of the projects I did, it was a gay couple who had lived in the unit for a bit, but they told me when they moved in, it was this like single older woman who was a high-powered business executive. And one of the things, the first thing they did was really removed all the AV jacks from every wall because she had a TV in every room, including the bathroom, toilet suite, and bathroom generally. And they said that because they met her when they went to go close on the unit and all that, it was on CNBC all the time. It was just the most business. It was just like, imagine Jim Cramer just 8 times in your own home. It's insane. I could never do that. He's the screaming guy. I think we talked about him once on the pod for some reason.
No, we did.
He always makes wrong calls on stuff, but they still give him a show, so he must be doing something right.
Yeah, I think we talked about him on the Silicon Valley Aesthetics episode. But yeah, so we're closing up on the Olympics, and just mentioned the Paris Games. So just a few things to keep in mind if you are excited about the Olympics, or like you want to know what the Paris ones will be like. We actually didn't get to mention this. I thought I'd bring it up by now, but they're adding a huge expansion, 4 lines and 2 extensions of their metro, which is like one of the largest expansions in the world. And it puts our public transit planning and expansion to shame. Like,
their bike infrastructure has been wild in its speed. Like Paris has like overnight converted itself into this just like biking place, kind of in an iron-fisted way. Like a lot of people are mad about it, but they kind of just have this like, you got to try something attitude towards bike infrastructure, and they make it very temporary and movable so they can kind of workshop ideas and see how it plans out. Yeah, no, it's very cool. I have been like, when I'll go to cities, if they have a bike share program, I'll try and ride it. I tried that in New York. It was very easy in COVID. It was very difficult post-COVID, to bike around there just because it's insane with the people there. And I almost got hit by a guy on one of those one wheel things. But yeah, Paris, I'd love to bike around.
Yeah. Another thing they're planning is like some facilities will be like pre-existing, I think. And then there's only one new stadium they're building. The others are just temporary. That's kind of cool. I mean, Paris is built. They don't really need like more
They're
stuff.
done. They've reached the completion.
That makes sense to me. And then the final take is just that this logo, it's not bizarre, but I don't like it. It's like, it kind of looks like a sassy French girl with a bob. And yeah, you said it looks like a wine logo.
Yeah, so it's a woman with a bob. So it's Marianne, like the.
Oh wait, no. I think it's supposed to be a flame, but it looks like a woman.
It is a woman. It's supposed to be a woman.
No, I think it's supposed to be a flame, but it just looks like.
I read about this. It is a representation of Marianne, who is the like the French personification of the country, which those should be around more. America's is called Colombia, and she's not used a lot. But yeah, and then the mascots are that classic, not like tricorn hat, but the Phrygian cap, which is what everyone wore in the French Revolution. And so it's two hats that have come to life. Those are the mascots.
Wait, I want to look this up.
The Phrygias, the Phrygias? And they have one of them for the Paralympic Games, which we didn't really talk about.
Oh, no, I like these. These are cute.
They're cute. That's what I think they're cute.
Wow, I actually do like these.
Yeah, they're much better than the London things.
Yeah, the eyes are like SpongeBob eyes.
Yeah, they've got a certain charm to them.
Yeah.
I think for the Tokyo ones, they just used Pokemon, didn't they? Which those are very well designed little mascots. So you might as well.
I think there were other mascots, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Also with Tokyo, I think there was at the closing games in Rio, I think the like Tokyo Prime Minister or something showed up in a Mario hat. Do you remember that?
I think vaguely, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's funny.
Cool.
But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode. This one was so much fun.
Yeah.
I don't think we're ever gonna find another sports one to do. So.
You're welcome. We'll figure out something.
Yeah. But yeah, have a good week and look forward to the Olympics this summer.
See ya.
See you. Bye.